Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Hello, welcome back. I'm really looking forward to my conversation with Conor Lynch. Conor is a fabulous guy. Met him in person, would you believe, not just the Ethernet, the internet, etc. He is a digital innovator and educator who grew his personal brand Connector, starting from a side hustle into a 7-figure business. With award-winning experience building global brands and training over 5,000 professionals, he now helps ambitious individuals, groups, and organizations build assets with long-term value. We're going to be discussing his fabulous new book called Learn, Earn, Own, which is just such a huge topic in the rise of the AI world. But before we get into that, Conor, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Ben. It was lovely to meet you too.
I want to get into Learn, Earn, Own in just a minute because it's a fabulous insight for employees, for people in consulting careers, even running businesses, but I think for kids coming through the next generation. But for context, it's about moving from the career ladder to career assets and thriving in the age of AI. And it's about building assets and a new way of work. But before we do that, you came from a traditional world of work. Do you want to give us a quick snapshot of that and, leading up to the agency and beyond?
I actually climbed the career ladder myself. Went to college, studied marketing, graduated with a degree, went to Smurford College, Ireland's top business school, graduated from there. Then I worked in marketing, but the internet started to emerge. So I thought, this is amazing. Beyond dancing leprechauns and cats and whatever, I just thought this is so much potential. I finally was interested in IT, put my entire career into online and then into social media. And then this is the third wave now, AI and automation. So I've been working in technology for about 25 years from a marketing and communications and a business perspective. And along the way, I worked for some top agencies, worked for brands like Guinness, Coca-Cola while I was an employee. And then I decided, I think I could probably do this on my own. Like I could probably set up my own agency, not realizing how hard it was, but I did succeed. And then we ended up working with the likes of Sony and Huawei and Volkswagen and Benecol. But it was a hard slog for 10 years. It ended up with an exit. I sold the business to another agency.
Brilliant.
And this was just before the lockdowns. And I then started to take stock on my career and other careers and what I'd learned and what I'll do next. But very much a traditional go to school, get a job, climb the ladder, et cetera, et cetera. I've done all of that.
Yeah, tell us about the Connector business itself, like what sort of services and then, how did that grow?
Yeah, well, it's actually started off as meetups. So I started off as a little meetup called Connector because it was like a personal brand. Conor is in Connector. So I thought, okay, that's kind of quirky. So I started getting together with a few friends and then that kind of grew from the first one had 12 people. Then we were regularly getting 100, 120 people meeting up to discuss digital and entrepreneurship and all the rest. This was about 2008, 2009. I was learning about community and raising my profile and simultaneously building my personal brand. Then I quit my job and decided to go all in with this agency. Along the way, we launched some software. We launched a training division. We did a lot of services around traditional digital marketing, but also events. We were very strong on events and experiences and ran events for 500 people at times for the likes of EY and Huawei, etc., in Ireland and abroad. So huge amount of learnings. And I discussed learning, earning and owning. I wanted to take control and own more of my work. That was essentially what happened.
So if we turn to the book, Learn, Earn, Own, we're constantly hearing the numbers, the statistics of either job losses or the economic foundations talking about how jobs are going to disappear. And maybe then you get the bright side, it's okay, there'll be other jobs that are created and things like that. And I saw one job a while back in the COVID, which was an emoji interpreter, I think it was. And there were DJs at football, soccer matches because there was no crowd. So yes, there are new jobs. Perhaps not all of them will last. With the rise of AI, I think your thesis is that we need to think differently as individuals in terms of personal wealth creation, income, revenue, etc., and by generating not steps on a career ladder, but building career assets. So could you give us a little bit of an explanation by what that means?
Yeah, so I actually came up with a new framework. It's called the assets ladder. So instead of climbing the career ladder, you climb the assets ladder. And the assets ladder starts off at 0%. You're an owner of nothing as an employee. Most workers own nothing in the business that they work in. So Seekers, workers have 0% ownership. But then as you move up the ladder, you move from a partner, you might have a 50-50 with somebody, partner on an asset. And an asset could be a digital product, it could be an event, it could be a community, it could be a personal brand, it could be a web app. It doesn't have to be a factory. It doesn't have to be a business. Digital assets have created so many opportunities for people to become owners of something. So I call these career assets. And you don't have to be wealthy to have assets anymore. You can build your own assets if you don't have the money to buy assets. So I built up my personal brand as an asset and ended up selling it on. And then you're moving up the assets ladder. At the top of the ladder, you're an owner, but then you can be a multiplier. You can have multiple assets. I talk about multilinear careers rather than linear careers. So people will be doing more things, and try and make them more integrated with what you're doing, but also how could you collaborate with others? So a big step in this is partnerships. So how can you partner with more people, have more collaborative careers? So that's the assets ladder. It's part of the book. And then career assets is a big thing where basically anyone can create something nowadays and take more ownership of your work. Don't necessarily spend all your time working on somebody else's dreams, work on your own.
The Google famous example was that they used to get 10% of their work time to be able to work on side projects. It was still, I think, a Google project, but that's how you, in theory, you got these brilliant new ideas that the company could expand on. It's still fulfilling. And then, yes, you'd get bonuses and stuff, but it's not really your asset. So can you give some examples, practical examples of what assets are that a person in a job right now could start to develop and build?
Yeah. So for example, you could be a great writer, but you could write all your content for the company blog and not put anything on your own domain name, on your own personal brand. Your personal brand is your strongest potential asset just to get started. Everyone can start creating assets today. It's not about saving up to it. So if you're creating content, if you're, on social media active, why not save some of your best ideas for your own profile instead of giving away all your good stuff? Think more about what you can do to raise your own brand profile rather than the company one. You can now create web applications, tools with AI code. So is there something you can do on the side as a little side project, a learning project? It doesn't have to be a business. I make the big distinction between being an entrepreneur and being an experimenter. So you and I are entrepreneurial. We're gone out and we've done our own thing and but it's not for everybody. So if you want to find out if it is for you and how to get there in small steps, take an experimental approach and try and run some experiments. So the book is full of prompts. You can upload your CV and then you can run some prompts to kind of come up with multiple ideas for you, learning projects, earning projects, owning projects. So just you can start feel like an owner, take ownership of your career rather than waiting from Helen in HR to manage your career and tell you what to do next. Career guidance is still quite similar to when I was in school. Go to school, get a job, climb the ladder. We need new ideas. So that's why I thought the book had to be written from an entrepreneurial point of view, from somebody who has been there and done that and gone out on my own and pioneered and then sat down and wrote down, okay, what did I learn? How can I build frameworks that make this easier to understand, and follow? As you said earlier, it could be somebody starting off. It could be somebody mid-career, somebody late career that just is a bit stuck and think, okay, how can I come up with new ideas either on my own or collaboratively with others?
And to put that into an HR context for listeners from my own career, I went through an assets ladder approach, which was in a job. I was doing HR, let's call it internal HR consulting, business partner type stuff. I went to my boss and said, I keep running conversations with line managers about managing underperformers and difficult people. Is it okay if I develop a little training course that we take all the line managers through on how to handle these difficult conversations? And I teamed up with a training person who was really good at running training sessions. I then started teaching that in night schools. That was an hourly rate of pay, so it wasn't an asset yet, but it was teaching me stuff. And then later on, as you mentioned, partnering, I contacted an employee engagement or retention expert in another country and said, you've got this brilliant book and package thing. Can I rebrand it for Australia? And he said, yeah, cool. We teamed up, did a lot of work to rebrand it, started selling it. And then, of course, we had the global recession, which killed any need for employee retention. But the point is, from an internal job, you can develop assets, whether that be training courses, books, training courses. And now, for instance, with our own Get More HA client stuff, we have AI tools, write your proposal or write your LinkedIn post and things like that. So I love these examples that you're sharing. And do you see that there's a greater need or a greater take up, or what's the demand, do you think, or people just don't get it yet?
I love your examples, Ben. And that's totally it. You had that moment to say, okay, I've got a really good idea. Do I just hand it over, or do I try and look after myself a little bit more with this? Can I build these ideas for more personal benefit? Because you might get canned in the job and then you've handed over everything. And that's what people are worried about. I'm finding that actually a number of people are buying the book for their children. I was in a college recently and I just chatted to 4 of them at random, and they were all very worried about AI and what it means for their career. But people are now starting to realize that something is huge is happening and changing. And I think it could finally be the impetus for people taking more ownership of their career, more ownership of their career planning, because I've found that no one really plans beyond the next job. That's a big problem.
Well, look, the way I think about it is that the AI platforms and tools that we hear about, they're owned by a handful of billionaires.
Yeah.
And there are many others, but there is a level where it's owned by someone else, in which case you then have to beg or pay to use these services or access these tools and things. So it's better to be an owner of things and have a bit more control and revenue options and income options, as well as control over what you use and do. Is that a fair enough call?
Absolutely, yeah. Like I recently created one of the hardest assets to create is like a book. From the book, there's going to be some small courses. There's also a web application that's created using Claude Code. So it's very much in the hands of people like you and me that maybe weren't traditionally coders, that have ideas to whip up a web application that kind of a utilitarian purpose, can be useful for something, and use that as another way to capture data, to derive further insights, to create new products. So there's huge amounts of people who've been very successful creating web applications and apps now because of the democratization of coding. I'm very excited about the next phase, but I think it's bringing people on the journey that it's just take ownership of your work, take ownership of your career, learn more skills, earn more income, and own more assets. Yeah. That's the crux of the book.
You mentioned Claude Code. Everyone knows about ChatGPT and maybe a handful of other things. Can you explain what is Claude Code? It can seem quite technical. So if someone wanted to build something where they can say, hey, come and use this thing, whether it's free or paid, but come and use this thing, whether that's as a consultant or as a solo person looking to build their first little test asset. From an HR business perspective, what could they build? Maybe it's a job interview guide tool or something. How would they use it to do something like that?
Ever since I started my career, I collaborate with people who are more technical than me because I never studied computer science. So recently, a friend of mine, we worked on a Claude Code web application. It's a tool that allows somebody to upload their CV into our web application, the learn, earn, own web application. And it will then give you 3 possible career paths for you to choose. And the prompts are all pre-supplied. So you can create a personalized report for somebody based on my knowledge and based on the knowledge bank that is within Claude or within ChatGPT. These are the type of tools that I talk about and my guests talk about at my events because I'm always learning. And I'm finding that Claude Code is slightly more technically advanced for the basic user, that Lovable and Replit and Claude Codex could be more accessible just to get started. But it is a next step.
So that is the Learn, Earn, Own idea generator web app. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So it's learnearnown.me is the website. You can get free access to that application, but it's only one of many. I have tons of stuff in the book, different scorecards that I now need to turn into web applications. So you can do this test, do this quiz, do this checklist, get this person report. Here's your recommendations. So for your listeners, is there something that people find valuable that you can create and it's a unique insight, or you have an ebook that you did on it, or you did 20 blogs before on a topic? Turn that into a knowledge base, bring it into something like Notebook LM or Gamma, create some content, or else bring it in and create a web application.
The way I built my business up from the beginning was I blogged a lot before moving into my business. And then eventually when I started, I had a web following and traffic and all that kind of stuff. I then, years later, took all of those blog posts, turned them into an ebook, and then that turned into content for training courses and workshops, which, sold, or memberships and things like that. And the evolution of that is now that has gone in and created one of our AI tools, which is the Ask Ben tool, whereby I'm not there 24/7, but Ask Ben is, and it's got all the information and stuff.
This is classic learning, earning, and owning. And you've raised your profile, you thought about Ben, the brand, you creating content, built the audience, monetize the audience, add new services, collaborations, run events. People can learn tons from your journey.
Yeah, thank you very much. The two things. One is, your book, firstly, I've been right through it. I love all the stories and examples. There are people in there sharing their experience and thoughts on it and the feedback on the book. So I love that. It's very engaging. And secondly, around that, you mentioned the kids. It's definitely a book you could hand to your teenage kids and say, all right, here's the future. It's got all those exercises and tools and things to get them to think. And yes, there are prompts, so they get to play with technology, which will probably make it more exciting for them to use it. Something else that you triggered there was the fact that if someone wants to stay in a career, in a job, they like doing the job or the steady income and stuff like that, but they like the idea of a side thing, and they cannot necessarily get permission to do stuff. There is a thing, well, one way of calling it is the faceless offer. That's what people talk about. Some of my clients, they come out and they say, I want to launch a business, but I'm not ready yet. What do I do? And so that's where the blogging, the newsletter stuff comes in to build up an audience. But they can do that without their name. And some of them end up creating products and stay in their jobs, handbooks, industry guides and stuff, which they can then sell through Facebook ads and stuff. That's what we do. But it doesn't all have to be, I am now running a business and everyone buy my product. There are other ways of doing it. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. It's not about quitting your job. It's about not letting your job be your only plan, because the rug could be pulled from under you. Having a one income strategy is more risky nowadays. So dig a well before you get thirsty. Start thinking about what other things could I do? You know, as Daniel Priestley would say, you're standing on a mountain of knowledge already. What can you do to mine that and bring it out to the market? And, you know, could be through some content, could be through an ebook, could be through an interactive web application, and collaborate with others. If you're not technical, find some friends that are. And for the last year and a half, I just got together with some mates. We call it the AI Street Fighters. Just got into a room with a screen and said, okay, what's the latest this week? Let's just have a look at who's doing what. You know, you have to have a little bit of time to spend on your career, because it's so important. Because, as I say, it could disappear, the job could disappear, and now is the time to get ready.
And I like that idea of just learning, tinkering away with some stuff, and you'll be surprised what comes out, and it may be something completely different. I mean, there are so many examples of famous, big, huge companies that have gone down completely different paths. What's the home sharing place? Airbnb. I mean, that was just an Excel spreadsheet hidden behind a little booking form or something originally, and now it's a big, fancy global company. But I remember years and years ago, an American guy moved to my hometown of Perth in Australia, and he went, I don't know what's on. So he started keeping a simple spreadsheet of festivals and concerts and things that were on, and everyone kept asking for it. So he just made a simple little one-page website. It wasn't selling it, but I'm sure that could have evolved into something much bigger.
Absolutely. So the point of the book as well, I do give prompts. If you want to get promoted, here's some prompts. If you want to stay in your job, here's some prompts. If you want to learn new skills and they won't allow you to start vibe coding tools at work, do it in the evening and then come back into work and say, this is what I whipped up at the weekend. Can I now work on the new gig guide? Can I get a job in the music sector because I love music? Because I can vibe code and whip up, you know, this guest list app or something like that. It's not about ditching everything and running off and setting up a unicorn. It's about, okay, how can learning new skills help you no matter whether you're employed or self-employed or an employer? There's something in it for everybody. People just have to start taking those first steps, learning something new, whether to tell your boss about it or to tell your next boss or to do your own thing, you know, be your own boss.
I love it. If people want to learn more about the book and or your events and what you're up to, what should they do next?
I basically run my website through Substack. It's on my own domain name, www.conorlyn.ch. And the book is on Amazon, it's on Kindle, but you can go to my website for links to all the different things that I'm up to.
So yeah, if you're listening to this on the go, we'll have those links in the show notes. But do check out the book for yourself. If you're in a job, if you're running a business, then definitely check it out, because it will trigger ideas on products, services you can create, or even create them internally. You don't have to be selling stuff necessarily. It might be about how do you maintain your clients and maintain your service, but in an easier way, which either gives you an easier life or it might create more income because you can take on more clients. So think differently there. And then lastly, as we discussed, definitely think about getting it for your kids, because it's a really enjoyable read, very practical, lots of examples and tools and stuff, as I said, so they will enjoy it, and it will trigger conversations with them as well for what happens in the future. So I think you've done a great job, Conor. I'm really impressed, and yeah, thank you for sharing it today.
Oh, thank you, Ben. It was so nice to hear your story as well, and I look forward to meeting up in person again soon.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks, and see you next time.